podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Rosie Nice, executive coach, leadership development consultant, and founder of Magic Coaching. And in this new series, we'll be exploring how organisations can thrive and help their teams reach their full potential by creating a successful coaching culture. I'll be talking with leaders from a wide range of organisations, inviting them to share their personal, real-life experiences of embedding a coaching approach within their workplace, hearing their successes, the challenges they've faced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Our aim is to offer practical insights and inspire you with the confidence to cultivate an environment where coaching becomes integral to organisational success, a culture of healthy, high performance. So hello and welcome to this episode in our series focusing on building a successful coaching culture. And today's guest is Anna Skeats. So hello Anna, and a very warm welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi Rosie, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So Anna is the CEO of the Rainy Day Trust, which supports the home improvement and home enhancement workforce and their families in times of need. And this is a new role for Anna. So today we're mainly going to focus on her previous role as CEO of the Mason Foundation. So Anna, can I start by asking you just to tell us a little bit about the Mason Foundation and the wonderful work that they do?
Yeah, sure. So the Mason Foundation was founded in 2017, so a relatively young charity. So a national charity with a mission of supporting individuals and communities most at need to essentially live happier, healthier and more fulfilled lives. Big part of the work that the Mason Foundation does is support young neurodivergent people. So we do a number of support programs. And one of those is Propel. And Propel is about supporting young people who are neurodivergent. So that's people that are autistic, people with ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, anyone who really feels like a bit of a square peg in a round hole and has perhaps struggled to navigate education. It's about helping to provide them springboards into meaningful employment.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I first met Anna when she was mentoring my adult son, who is neurodivergent, and he was job seeking. And the support Anna offered was amazing. And the story has a happy outcome because she helped him successfully achieve a really good role. And as we worked together and I got to know the Mason Foundation, I was so impressed by the culture that Anna had built. And I'm so delighted that I was able to invite her here to share her story. So in this episode, we're going to hear how Anna, as CEO, built the Mason Foundation from zero to a national organisation, and how she successfully embedded a coaching culture through their entire ethos, from the way she led her team to the way they build relationships with their external partners and how they work with the young people that they support. So Anna, we are here to talk about building a coaching culture. So I'd love to start by asking you about your vision. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, why did you decide to focus on building a coaching culture?
That is a really good question, Rosie. And I think the answer to that is I didn't make a conscious decision to build a coaching ethos within the organisation. It was just the only way I knew. And I think if we track back really to my early career, that's where those kind of building blocks of that empowerment approach came from. So I'm actually trained as a public health nutritionist, and I spent the first decade of my working career working in the NHS. So I worked on a population level, so working with very vulnerable communities, supporting people who had various challenges within their lifestyle. My job was to essentially help people to live healthier lives through better diet, being more physically active, various things like that. And what I found very, very early on was that the way to empower people to make change was to very much listen and learn and respond, not do to and tell individuals what to do. I saw firsthand for a lot of the communities that I were working with that they felt a real distrust between professionals, particularly healthcare professionals, that often gave them prescriptive advice, telling them what to do. And there was this kind of disconnect and real, I suppose, it's not surprising, that, you must do this, you must do that. Whereas my approach was very much about listening and understanding some of the challenges that those families were navigating and trying to help them to find a solution that worked for them and their families. And that formula served me well. It worked, essentially. I built trust. I became part of the community. So very, very early on, I worked in a community cafe, and it was all about empowering those local people. Then later on in my NHS career, I had the privilege of managing large teams of people, and particularly through quite a difficult change management process, so big 2P transfer. And often that workforce felt, I suppose, a sense of fear and worry through that 2P process. And what my role was to do is to help empower them and guide them through this transition. And the way to do that, again, was the same approach, making sure I'm listening, respecting the fact that they're the experts in what they do, and helping to guide them on that journey. So for me, it wasn't about a eureka moment of this is coaching and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my career. It was just a no-brainer, basically, a no-brainer that I then embedded into my work in the foundation. So if I move more recently into my career as CEO of the Mason Foundation, I started at the organisation pretty much at its point of inception. So we had we had no staff at the beginning, and then we brought staff in. And I really wanted this culture, this environment where staff felt trusted, they felt empowered, they were able to help, support and guide, because essentially that's what their role was to do in the community. So it's very much about a leadership approach where I haven't got all the answers. It's about providing the environment and that roadmap and supporting the teams to be able to create the magic dust, basically, do the great stuff that they do.
Brilliant. Fascinating. Thank you. Listening to you, the words that came up were empowerment, trust. You talked about listening. And it sounds as if you were building a coaching culture without ever using the term of coaching or culture, but it was with the behaviours that felt right to you and that delivered great results for you. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think when we first met, Rosie, I wasn't aware of what a coaching culture was, but actually it was fundamental to the DNA of what I wholeheartedly believed in terms of good leadership. It's about very much, I've always seen my role as creating the roadmap, the big picture stuff, but actually the people you work with often have the solutions. You're not there to have all the answers. It's about providing the environment to enable them to thrive. And that has been fundamental within my role at the Mason Foundation, because ultimately what our teams are there to do is to empower other people to be a catalyst for change. So the Mason Foundation's approach is about supporting champions, ambassadors and mentors, whether that's through community-based initiatives or whether it's about neurodiversity working in schools and businesses. Essentially, the approach is the same. We're supporting those organisations and those individuals within the community to make change happen in a way that's relevant and works for them. And I think ultimately it's about a framework and a support mechanism that's very much two-way, where we're empowering those people to essentially create change.
So you're talking about using coaching and the coaching culture philosophy in different ways. And I love the fact that you've come to coaching. Some people come and build a coaching culture very mindfully. That's what they decide to do. They have a definition. They study coaching themselves and they build it. They bring consultants in exactly to help them. That's a great way to build a coaching culture. You've come at it from a very different angle, which is fantastic because it is around the behaviours which you've seen work with your team and with the organisations that you partner with and the young people that you support.
Yeah, 100%.
So tell us a little bit about the partnerships that you have with different organisations. It's interesting to hear how you've used coaching to build the partnerships with some of the organisations that you worked with.
Sure. So if I talk most recently about the work in the Mason Foundation, and then I'll move on to my current role at the Rainy Day Trust. Within the Mason Foundation, we support predominantly schools, colleges, education settings where young neurodivergent people are. And it's about helping and empowering the school teachers, support workers, anybody working with the young people around our approach, which is a strengths-based approach. So recognising that those young people have skills and traits, and whilst maybe GCSE maths and English is challenging for them, they've got fantastic skills that we need to nurture and support. And essentially what we're doing is creating mentors within those settings who then cascade that work to the young people. Then it's a cycle. And what we're starting to see is the work we're doing with our young people actually has a further ripple impact through alumni coming back and wanting to be champions and help others and mentor others through that process. So that's the education sector. We also work on the commercial side with businesses, helping them to build an inclusive workplace culture. again, using culture, a coaching ethos. So we create business mentors. It's about helping them to understand the value, the benefits of people who are neurodivergent, their skills, and then helping them to create this ripple culture across the organisation whereby young people coming in who are neurodivergent are embraced. So it's understanding that formula, but it's embedding it in a way that works for them. That is the key here, because what works for, say, somebody in hospitality versus somebody in construction is going to be a very different way of applying it. And that's where your coaching approach really comes into its own, because it's about how that individual embeds it in their workforce. So the formula, again, it's worked time and time again in different scenarios. And what I'm finding more recently in my new role, moving into the Rainy Day Trust, that we're looking at embedding this same approach through ambassadors. So the Rainy Day Trust supports a variety of industries across home improvement and home enhancement. So that's construction, housewares, DIY, pottery. So you can imagine that's a huge breadth of different people with different outlooks and perspectives. But ultimately, there's this approach. We want to support well-being within those organisations and ensure that we normalise talking about positive mental well-being and physical well-being and inclusion. So it's about listening, learning and responding to those businesses. You know, what are the challenges? How does well-being work in your workforce or not? And what can we do to support that together? So it's always a two-way thing. It's not doing two, it's empowering and collaborating.
And one of my favourite definitions of a coach is a thinking partner. The Nancy Klein definition of a coach is a thinking partner. And listening to you, that's exactly what you're doing. You're saying every organisation is different. The Rainy Day Trust is very different to the Mason Foundation, but the principles of partnering and helping people think through what their strategy is going to be, how it's going to work. You're not always there, obviously. You can't do it all yourself. So coaching is the way of helping people work out their own solutions.
100%. And I think the key here is everything I've done through my career is about embedding sustainable, scalable change. And scalable meaning thousands of people. We can never, as an individual, have that sort of impact. So it has always been about how do we create this ripple? So the ripple is through that empowerment. I call it empowerment, but essentially it's that coaching ethos, helping others to help others to help others. And for me, it has worked time and time again. I'm a great believer in this approach because ultimately it's not, and I've said this before, it's not about us having all the answers. It's about us helping to create the environment and the psychological safety, really, to enable people to explore, experiment and find the right solutions for them. I think that's the other point I'd say. Sometimes there is no right or wrong. It's about that exploratory phase and it's about guiding people through that. And that's definitely an ethos that I've really reinforced through my time as a leader, I suppose, is about ensuring that people feel they're safe to experiment, that it's okay to make mistakes. That's part of learning, that's part of growing. And ultimately, that's how, as an organisation, we get bigger and stronger because we're all building the solution together.
And you talked about psychological safety there, which is a big factor in building that coaching culture. So people are able to share their thoughts and share their ideas, share when they've made a mistake so that they can learn from that.
Yeah.
And you're talking about making change sustainable and making it scalable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really about ensuring that I talked about the roadmap earlier and understanding where we're heading. So what is it collectively that we're trying to achieve? And ultimately, where I've always seen my role is about helping to create that big roadmap, but not to necessarily identify what are the milestones to get there. That's where the team, whatever that team is, whether it's your direct reports, whether it's the people that work with them, whether it's the champions, the mentors, ultimately they're in control of positioning those milestones. And they need to have, as you say, that psychological safety to be able to explore and experiment and to find the right route. And then to know that you've got their back every point. This is us together. This is not just them on their own. And I find that approach works really well.
And what do you say? We're starting to think about some of the benefits of building the culture that you're describing. And in your experience, what are the key benefits that you would say you have been able to see and experience through building the culture that you've been building?
for a start, high performance, motivated people. People are keen to come to you with solutions. We always talk about come to me with solutions, not problems. And sometimes when people haven't been used to that culture, it's difficult because, they expect, you're the boss, us what we need to do next. And very much my approach has always been about, let's work this out together, or here are the factors. What do you think? And that really empowers performance. It empowers change. It enables greater outputs because everybody is being part of that solution rather than everything being on your plate. Your job as a leader is not about doing everything or being everything to every person. It's about being that orchestra conductor, helping everybody to thrive in their individual roles. I think the other key point here is an organisation is full of a breadth of people with lots of different skills and talents. And you as a leader, are not going to have all those skills and talents individually yourself. So it's about bringing out that and utilising those skills in the right way through this coaching approach, because they've then got the autonomy and confidence to be able to drive forward themselves. And it also builds stronger teams, more, I suppose, efficient teams. But if you're not there, it means everything doesn't stop. Everything continues to grow. No one person is indispensable, which I think is the fundamental part here.
Thank you. Interesting. And you talked about performance there and building high performance. And one of the things that leaders can sometimes worry about when they are building a coaching culture, a very supportive culture, we sometimes hear leaders worrying that will it make it difficult to manage performance if we're creating strong psychological safety, if we're creating a very supportive culture. Sometimes people will say, well, I find that makes it difficult for me to give developmental feedback and manage perhaps underperformance. So how did you integrate performance into the culture that you were building and managing performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say I found the absolute opposite, because if we go back to that roadmap scenario, and something that I've always prided myself on is everybody understanding the big picture at a level that's appropriate, but everybody understanding the fundamental cog they part in making that happen. And then between that individual, when you're looking at performance, you look at what is it you need to do to get there. So that individual then is part of the process of formulating their objectives. So as a leader, I've always been very big on ensuring clarity around role and objectives and expectations. And we don't have to use words like KPIs and targets because that might turn people off. But ultimately, people need clarity on what it is they're there to do, because that's then their benchmark of how they're performing. So I found that on the whole works incredibly well. It's very much a two-way thing. It's not I'm saying you must do. It's we're agreeing this is the way to get there. Over the years, obviously, I've managed large teams and lots of people. Sometimes you do have underperformance, but often underperformance is the result of something else. So it's about having that opportunity, again, coming back to psychological safety, to be able to ask those questions and harness trust so that people can be open. And 9 times out of 10, you can identify the solution together. You can understand maybe it's something that's going on at home. Maybe it's the fact that they haven't got the right tools to do the job. Maybe there's something else going on. So it's getting under the skin of what that issue is. 9 times out of 10, you're able to address it. And on that very, very infrequent chance that perhaps you can't address it, it could be that conversation around, is that the right role for the person? And then again, because of the coaching culture that you've reinforced, you have that opportunity to have those conversations about the skills, about the job. So let's be honest, people don't want to underperform. People want to thrive in their roles. So I find this approach and this two-way approach is really effective at delivering really high-performing teams.
Yeah, and you've talked about giving clarity, about setting clear goals, about being able to have very open conversations. And it sounds as if that trust that you're giving me some feedback, but I know you've got my best interests at heart, and I know you've got to know me as an individual, and I know you'll listen to what I've got to say.
Absolutely.
Is all part of using coaching to manage performance effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I was going to add is I often get asked that same question around performance in relation to inclusion. So if going back to the role of Mason Foundation, we do a lot of work with businesses to embed inclusion at the core of their company's culture. And a lot of people have a fear that, if we have neurodivergent or we welcome neurodivergent people into our workforce, is this going to affect performance? And my answer is always the same. It should be the opposite, because it's supporting the right people in the right roles with the skills and the tools and the environment to enable them to thrive. And I think that's the key. And it's the same thing, both sides. So I fundamentally believe the key to high performance is this approach.
Yeah, and it's lovely to hear you saying that actually this supportive culture, the coaching culture, helps manage your performance effectively. It doesn't get in the way. It's not a hindrance, which is sometimes expressed as a fear. It actually really helps build what we sometimes talk about is healthy high performance.
Yeah.
And you want high performance. You've mentioned well-being in the workplace, and it all comes together in the culture that you're building.
Absolutely. And I have to say, it's something that I've prided our team on developing from day one in the Mason Foundation. And I think being the co-founding CEO, it's been easier to do that because I've built the workforce from nothing to the 12 members of staff they are today. And that's been an absolute pleasure to see that grow and ripple. And it's been a fundamental point in my career over the last 3 or 4 years as I've stepped away a little bit of the people management, because the teams are growing and developing and becoming leaders in their own right. So that's been an absolute joy to see that ripple. And I'm very confident that ripple will continue. And interestingly, that was one of the biggest questions that employees confidentially spoke about and feared when I was leaving the organisation, that culture would change. And I was absolutely confident and reassured them that it wouldn't, because it's ingrained in the DNA of every single person in that organisation. It's part of who they are. So I'm very, very much bought into the fact that if you build this culture from the start, it pays dividends in terms of the outcomes and the connectivity and the collaborative nature in which the team works.
Yeah, and I've heard culture described as the way we do things round here. And it sounds like it's become very embedded. That is the way we do things round here. And it runs very deep within the organisation.
Absolutely. It does. And then people want to work for you as well. I think that's the other thing. We always talk about this culture when we're recruiting. We put a lot into our recruitment. So we built in an informal chat stage before we get to formal interview. And that's really to talk about the way we do things within that organisation. And I wholeheartedly believe that has been a huge part of the success of the organisation, because everybody is built into it. It's the heartbeat of what the organisation is.
That's interesting, because I've worked with many organisations building a coaching culture. And sometimes I've found that people that have been there for a while, they understand it. They understand that their leaders and managers will adopt a coaching approach. They get very used to it. They love it. And sometimes when new people come in and they're used to perhaps more traditional line management and perhaps a traditional way of leading and managing, they're like, oh, this is different. And there's a bit of an adjustment. Have you found that sometimes when you've had new people joining, that it takes a little bit of time for them to understand and buy into it?
Yeah, I think so. That said, I think because we're very, very open about that culture that we embrace from day one, the types of, and even in the language of our job descriptions, the types of people that come into the organisations usually are really bought into that approach anyway. But I can think about perhaps some of our newer members of staff who maybe had less line management experience and perhaps weren't used to coming to the table with solutions. So would expect the manager to tell them what to do and to get on with it. And that has been a cultural shift, but I think it's been a really positive one. It's been a journey and it's taken time. But to look at how those individuals have flourished within the organisation within a very, very short space of time. And then I think that the wonderful thing is how they then embrace that when they're working with their mentors or their champions and their ambassadors within their day job. So again, it comes back to this ripple. So yes, there is a period of adjustment, but I think it's reinforcing that ethos throughout, explaining the benefits. It's again talking about the big picture, where we're heading and why. And I've never had any conflict in response to that approach. Everybody has embraced it once they've sort of understood it. And I suppose felt in a safe enough environment to be able to work to it. I think often people don't like it initially if they don't feel they've got that confidence to speak up, or they're in fear of getting the wrong answer or not having all the tools to be able to make those decisions. So going back to earlier conversations, it's about creating that environment, giving the tools and the empowerment to enable those people to feel that they can create the solutions.
Yeah. And it's really interesting listening to you say you spend time explaining the culture to people. You talk about the culture, you talk about the behaviors that you are looking for, and you encourage people to speak up, you listen to people. And we run a lot of leader coach training sessions for different organizations. And one of the things that we sometimes see is people come on our leader coach training workshops, they love it, they get really into it, they go back to their role and they start embracing those behaviors, they start asking questions and encouraging people to engage in the coaching. And their team members are going, why are you asking me so many questions? What's happening here? And sometimes organizations can miss out that bit around explaining to the teams what the coaching culture is, what the benefits are for them. And it is an important part in helping everybody become upskilled, not just the leaders and the managers.
Absolutely. It's a whole organisational ethos. And I suppose that's where I've been really lucky, particularly in the last 10 years, because a big part of my role within the Mason Foundation was putting those building blocks, the foundations in place. So it was easier in a sense because I didn't have an existing workforce to bring on that journey with me. So I can imagine it's much more challenging, but it's so important. It's not a one person, it's not a do two, that people need to understand why. They need to see the big picture and they need to be bought into that. And that takes time. That's not a brilliant, I've been on a course, here's the theory, let's embed it. It's a progressive thing. It's an evolution, but it's so fundamental to high performance and effective teamwork. It's certainly worth that investment, but it's got to be done in the right way.
Yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts around that, because you talked about putting some of the building blocks in place. You did it early. So tell us a little bit more about the journey. So you were there right from the inception of the Mason Foundation. You knew what culture you wanted to build, which was great. You had that clarity. So tell us a little bit more about the journey and what were those building blocks you put in place and how did it progress over time?
Okay, so the very start of the journey was, so it was myself and the founder, we sat down and we looked at what is it we're trying to achieve. So ultimately, the mission of the organisation is empowering people to live healthier, happier lives at scale. Like, we want to be this national charity that can have great positive impact across the UK. The only way we're going to do that is by building a model that enables scalable change. So the starting point was to think about who do we need to do that. So looking at the workforce. So we went out to advert and we hired a number of individuals. And for me, I talked earlier about the importance of the recruitment. That has been so fundamental because for me, it is about that fit. It's about the culture and people that are really bought into being part of the solution, not necessarily rigidly focused on their job description. It's about, we've got this big challenge here and it's a huge challenge, but what a wonderful opportunity to create something together. And I would say every single person within that organisation has always understood what we're trying to achieve. And we had a 5-year strategy. They're now on the second part of that, where we're looking at UK-wide scale. And ultimately, we have recruited individuals across the country who are training and support workers. So their day job is absolutely around this coaching culture. It's about empowering others, because we couldn't possibly build an organisation that delivers the level of scale without that culture, because our team would always need to be relatively small because we're a small charity driving big impact. So I think they're a team of 12 now. But ultimately, if you look at that network's 400 or 500 people that have all been empowered because they understand the mission, they understand what we're trying to deliver. So whether that's champions delivering community mile activity, activating people within local community areas, or mentors in schools, colleges, alternative provisions, and then your business mentors, all of them are bought into that same cultural change.
So the culture that you've built has enabled you to have a much bigger impact than if you tried to do everything yourselves.
Absolutely.
And that's true, I guess, of a manager in any organisation, quite apart from you with your partnering with external organisations, etc.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, we all understood that mission from day one. And the other benefit that we've not talked about, we talked about trust, but I've really felt a sense of, I suppose, loyalty and drive to do the right thing, to be so committed to that mission, because people are empowered, because they feel a strong part of that team. There's never an I in team. We are very much a collaborative unit. I always talk about it as an extended family, which is why why it was so hard for me to move on from the Mason Foundation, because what we've built has been brilliant, and what they continue to build and will continue over this next period will be exciting, because I know those fundamental building blocks are there to stay because they work, and every single person in that organisation is absolutely built into that.
And when you're thinking about reflecting on your journey, are there any challenges, bumps in the road that would be interesting to share with us? Journeys are rarely smooth all the way through.
It's always been a challenge. I think ultimately, I suppose I'm a very driven person. I see the big picture. I want to be running at everything at 100 mile an hour. I think it's making sure we work at the team pace. It's making sure we listen and learn and respond. And I think sometimes as a leader, I can get frustrated, but I think my team probably can get frustrated with me as well, because I am 100 miles an hour, and sometimes that's not the right way to be. It's about, as I've said at the beginning, listening, learning, reflecting, finding the right route. And I think sometimes leaders, because of that fast-paced nature, you rush in and you want to have the solutions, which is the absolute opposite of what we're talking about here. And that isn't the right way, because you're not going to gain respect and buy-in if it's the Anna way. It's got to be teamwork. So I think that's been the hardest thing for me, and probably the hardest thing for my team too. And also, it's about two-way challenge as well. I really respect people challenging me, questioning, asking questions, asking why. But that's taken time to build up as well, because obviously you're the leader of the organisation. People think that your word is, sacred in some way. Absolutely not. Everybody's voice is equal. But it's taken time for the team to have that confidence to be able to, I suppose, challenge and offer other options and solutions. And more often than not, those other solutions are the better ways. So it's also being resilient that just because people are questioning the way you've maybe suggested or something, it's not a reflection on you as a leader. In fact, it's the opposite, because you're listening and you're understanding where they're coming from, which obviously is a valued perspective. And more often than not, their voice, their knowledge, their understanding is closer to what we're trying to achieve, because they're less removed from the problem we're trying to solve. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And it sounds like you're very conscious about being a role model as well for the behaviours that you are imbuing in the whole organisation. It's about you being vulnerable sometimes, you being open to challenge, you admitting I'm not always right, my decisions or what I want to do won't always happen. So it's about you embodying that as well, which isn't always easy, is it, when you are in a leadership position?
No, exactly. I suppose that's been a big learning curve for me. And I think sometimes I'll be open and say I have ADHD. So I sometimes struggle a bit with rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So it's like, oh, have I got it wrong? Do they not like that? But ultimately, that's part of being a leader. That's part of collaborating, working as a team. You're not supposed to have it right all the time. So that's definitely been part of my journey, my development. But it's something that I'm embracing and I'm loving, because actually it's a huge compliment if your team have those solutions, because they're going to be much better at executing those because they've come from them. They're owning them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you look back and think about this journey, are there some real key celebration moments? There are moments that you look back and go, yes, that's exactly the behaviours that I really hope to see, or things you think, yes, we're there. And you sort of see that reflected back at you?
I think that's a really good question, and I think it's really relevant for me at the point in my career right now. So I left Mason Foundation 8 weeks ago, and for me that was a real mixed bag of emotions. One of, sadness, leaving something that I've built from inception, a team that I love, that I consider to be part of my extended family, but also a period of celebration and joy to see what we've built together and to see what they're able to continue to develop and achieve without me. And that has been fundamental, because ultimately now has been the point that I have confidently been able to step away and go, guys, you've got this, you've got the skills, you've got the tools, you've got the workforce, you've got the network, you know what you're doing. And they're running with it. They're embracing it. And I have a look on LinkedIn and see what they're doing from day to day. And it's lovely. It brings a great big smile to my face to see what they're achieving. And that's not credit to me. That's credit to them. That's credit to what collectively we've built. So for me, that is something I'm immensely proud of. It's a great point for me to be moving to a new challenge in a new career, a very, very different challenge, moving to a charity with almost a 200-year legacy, fantastic fantastic foundations, but still a huge opportunity to embed this culture in a way that actually helps that charity to be more relevant and more modern to what the workforces that we serve through those sectors, what they need now. And again, it comes back to those building blocks. It's that coaching ethos, because if we can empower the businesses to be able to cascade and build this culture from within, we have that same impact ripple across the industry, essentially. So yeah, immensely proud, particularly the last 6 months, of what we've achieved and where we're heading, or where they're heading and where I'm heading.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there's one thing that you look back on that you think, I'm so glad I did that and I'm going to take that and apply it in my new role, what might that be? A behaviour or a way of working? Is there one thing in particular?
Yeah, I think it is absolutely that understanding that I'm not there to have all the answers. Somebody very wise said to me just before I started my new role at the Rainy Day Trust, listen, make sure you listen. And that was the most valuable piece of advice, because my first 6 weeks has all been about listening and understanding and formulating this context of which I'm working in, because I'm not here to deliver solutions. I'm here to help create a roadmap and facilitate that with my partners, with my stakeholders, with the trustees, with my colleagues. So yeah, absolutely. The one fundamental thing is listen, learn and respond. You're not supposed to have all the answers.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So as we come to the end of our discussion, we've covered so much ground and you shared some fabulous insights from your experience. And thank you for that. And so as we pull the conversation together, we'll be having listeners, I'm sure, who are embarking on their own journey to creating a coaching culture. They may be at the beginning, they may be in the middle of it, they may be encountering some bumps in the road. So what would be the key tips, thinking about everything we've covered today, that you would pull together and share with a fellow organisational leader or manager embarking on this path?
Yeah, fantastic. I would say there's 3 core things that I would advise. The first thing is culture is built over time, and it's about bringing people with you. So it's about creating that environment, that trust, that psychological safety. And it's those foundations, essentially. So that's number 1. Number 2, it goes back to the point I just made. It isn't about you as a leader having all the answers. It's about creating the spaces where everyone else can find their own. And then that third thing, which we haven't talked about, but I think it is fundamental, is make sure yourself as a leader, you have the opportunity to have that coaching relationship. So look to peers, mentors, colleagues, people that you know in your network that can help provide that for you as well. Because I think that everybody is on a journey of development and growth. So I feel that's really valuable for the leaders as well coming into this.
Yeah, and that's a lovely point to finish on. It's about looking after ourselves as leaders and making sure that we're in a really good place to be able to offer that leadership.
Absolutely.
So 3 lovely tips there, which is a great, I think, place to pull the conversation together. And it's been so lovely talking with you today. If listeners would like to connect with you, stay in touch, I know you post some great content on LinkedIn yourself, particularly around neurodivergence in the workplace. So would it be okay if listeners connected with you on LinkedIn, Anna?
Absolutely, yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Anna Skeats, and that's spelled Skeats. So feel free to look me up.
Yeah, lovely. And I certainly follow you and really enjoy the content that you post on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think we'll finish it there. And thank you so much for being a guest on this episode of the podcast and sharing your insights and your story with us, Anna. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rosie. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.